In the quirky year of 2012, as doomsday fears fizzled, Czech Games Edition changed the plot, opening doors to games and designers worldwide.
In 2011, when we were in Essen again, we were already known because we already released several games which got quite big attention. And we were approached by two designers, Daniele Tascini and Simone Luciani, with their game, which was Tzolk'in. Back then they were calling it Mayan Ages, but later we found that it's probably not a good name because many people then called the game Mayonnaise. So we needed to change the name. Before Tzolk'in, all our games were from Czech designers. And we felt like, since we are Czech Games Edition, that we should release games from Czech designers. But we were feeling like it would be okay to release a game from another designer, non-Czech or Slovak designer, if that game would be really exceptional, really something extraordinary. And with Tzolk'in, we had that feeling from the very beginning. And at the end of Essen, they came to us and basically gave us their only copy of the game, only prototype.
So we took it and we played it. I think it was the four of us, Vlaada, Peter, me and Vít. And we sat together, we played it. And Vlaada completely broke the game. Like he found an exploit and he made like twice as much point than anybody else. And it was way too long and everything, but we saw the potential.
When we saw the game, said, okay, we need to publish this, yeah, because it was so awesome, the basic mechanics with the wheels. It looked awesome, felt awesome. But then we played the game and it didn't work at that time. It was a bit broken and a bit too long and so on, but nothing that CGE development and with cooperation with the author can fix.
So we told them that we would like to publish it and we started working on it. And since, there were those predictions that world might end in 2012 because Mayan calendar will end at 2012, we knew that it would be really good to publish it in 2012.
But the biggest potential was the production, because nobody ever did cardboard game with interlocked mechanisms. So we started to figure out how to do these gears.
Cardboard was not a good option for the gears, so they started to explore plastic. But they wanted to have illustrations engraved on the main gear, and making the mold with a CNC machine would increase the production of plastic by 5 times, which was not affordable. Then, since mold is a piece of steel, they explored the option of laser, but the idea was also abandoned because it would take a long time. And just as they were starting to get disappointed, someone mentioned acid, as acid can eat up the steel of the mold and make the engravings.
So we found some company and they told us, yes, we are able to do it. It was something like 100 times cheaper to actually do this than via CNC. So we said, yes, we want to do that.
Like, I remember I was falling asleep and I was like, okay, if this doesn't work, then we are screwed. We, threw a lot of money. We are not gonna make SN because all of that. The next morning he called me and he said like, well, we tried and I've never seen anything like that. And I was really terrified because I was like, oh, we totally destroyed us. And he was telling me, this is the nicest thing I've ever seen engraved in a metal, like you have to see. It was long before the cell phones and the good cameras, so I really didn't see it. He only tried to describe it. And when I first saw it on the first time, I couldn't believe it. Even till this day, I get emotional because it was such a long shot that this is gonna work, and it works so brilliantly. And that gear, till this day, is one of the most popular among gamers to like put a lot of paint on it and show different designs. So that one turned really great.
It was really interesting, but on the other hand, that was not all the problems we had with Tzolk'in wheels.
You know how we make games? We produce them in Czech Republic, so we have a lot of time to work on them, and we use that time because the longer we spend thinking about the game and making it better, the better the product is and the better it sells, but also the game is better, and that's the point. So we send the data to print as late as possible, and that means that sometimes we don't get to see the final product until Essen actually, because it actually ships to Essen, and then there we just open the box and we say, wow, we made a really nice game. But sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes there's an error that we just missed, or something that wasn't meant to be there, or no one noticed it. One of those things was when Tzolk'in was released. The first copies we actually opened up in Essen, and we said, wow, we have these nice gears, and they are, that's great, let's just play a game. We assembled the board, and then we tried to move the gears, and they just didn't work. It was because you have to stack these pawns on the gears, and they just went like, you had to use a lot of force, and then it clicked and all the pawns just fell off. So we were like, no, this we can't sell this.
So we used a lot of resources to come up with an idea. We create a simple manual, simple user guide, the instructions what to do, use some tools to make the screws loose and whatnot. Anyway, the gamers forgave us. We fixed it for, I think maybe 3 or 4 reprints. We kept improving until we got it right. But that was one hell of a challenge to do, and I'm happy we did it, and I'm happy with the results in the end.
Tzolk'in has had a huge impact on me as a designer over the years. I often return to the game when I'm thinking about progression and engine building in games because I think it's done so well. There are the cult tracks, there's the tech tracks, there's the building tiles, and there's the sense of progression every turn as you're turning the dials and your workers are getting better passively at what they're doing without you even needing to do anything. But one of the biggest impacts that Tzolk'in has had on me as a designer is that I played it when I was designing Euphoria. And at the time, I'd never played a game with a tech track before, or any sort of element similar to a tech track. And as soon as I used the tech tracks in Tzolk'in, and I realized how interesting it was to choose, okay, which track do I move up on? When do I move up on it? How will that impact me for the rest of the game? I knew I needed to add something like that to Euphoria, and I added the allegiance tracks in Euphoria as a result, which are somewhat similar to the tracks in Tzolk'in, except they are shared by multiple players who have that same allegiance.
But Tzolk'in it's quite a challenge for me. I mean, it's one of those games that I keep losing. It's maybe because you need to think so much ahead, or all those spinning things in there. And but for that, I really like it because, as I said, I love the challenge in that.
I can't plan my turns ahead, because I just can't put together, because I can plan ahead, like, ooh, okay, so this needs to go here this turn so that I can take it off that turn, and then I plan everything ahead of time, and then I realize, oh no, I need to simultaneously take off and put on people this turn, else everything is terrible. And it happens every single time. I have no idea how it is possible that there is a game that does this to me, because usually that's not a thing. Tzolk'in just somehow grinds my gears. I'm funny. I know, I'm very funny.
The following year, Vlaada took his first plunge into the abstract realm of board games.
I exactly remember when I came with idea to for Tash-Kalar. It was actually on the same gaming event where I don't work and where I created code names, like several years before that. On the gaming events, I get up relatively early because I want to play, and several days in a row, when I woke up and went to the gaming room, there was only two people sitting. One very good player of abstract games, and one that was eager to learn. It was like a master and his apprentice, yeah. And they were always playing some game, and I said, okay, abstract games are not really my thing, but I really liked this this scene. Before I printed the first prototype, I played the game myself against myself like 100th of time. Yeah, so during that, I wanted to enjoy the game, so I put some effort to creating art, iconography, and everything. So I'm enjoying the game, yeah. And then I printed it and brought to other players.
Oh, Tash-Kalar, that was like a big return with David Koša. It was quite a lot of fun, but also a challenge to create the graphics. We actually hired an apartment close from Vlaada, or a small house even, very close from where Vlaada lived, because I wanted Vlaada and David to be together, cooperate on the game together, cooperate on the graphics, because Vlaada was kind of better translating, not translating, but like describing what he wants from the art, because he would need to tell me, then I would need to tell David, and quite often some things would be lost in my interpretation.
I believe the main problem of Tash-Kalar is it's actually really a two-player game. And we were afraid to publish just two-player game at that moment.
At that time, we were significantly smaller than we are right now. And we kind of needed every year come up with a game which would work. We weren't at a place where we could afford to release a game which will totally flop on the market. So we were a bit afraid about releasing just two-player game. And because of that, we decided that we will include also 3- and 4-player variants. And we added those kind of different modes how to play Tash-Kalar. And because of that, many people got kind of wrong impression that it's good game and designed for maybe 4 players, but the main or the game works the best for just 2 people. So some people felt like they are kind of tricked because of that. We released the base game and then some expansions, and originally Vlaada had ideas for expansions and he worked on them, but then later David Turci came with some ideas for expansions, so we did several of them with him.
In 2014, CGE made another game-changer move with the game Alchemists.
Matus was coming to some gaming conventions.
It was in the GameCon when I introduced the game to Peter, and he played it together with people from other Czech publishing companies, so it was like a big day for me. 4 people from different publishing companies are playing my game, and I'm just waiting whether they like it or not.
Alchemists is another thing where you say, okay, CGE is not getting tired of trying new things.
My first impression of the game was a lot of pieces
and the huge structure in front of each player. That was really massive at that day, because when we actually published that game, it was way smaller. But the prototype, that was really huge.
That was actually the first time I talked to Peter properly, was when he showed me this prototype at a gaming event of a weird game where you would deduce some sort of special chemical properties of elements to write theories about them. And, you know, if you say that to someone, you know, most people would be like, what are you talking about? I was like, that's exciting. I want to play that.
What I really liked about Alchemist, when Matus first presented it to me, was actually not the education element or worker placement elements and so on, but it was these little details from academic world, because he was in academic sphere as a student at that time, and all the details about you need to publish something to continue your study and so on, and this you know, conferences and proving something is wrong or some theory is wrong or confirming it's good and so on. It really appeals to me how it reflects his own experience and so on.
This great young guy, smart guy, I saw in him like Vlaada in early days, like, you know, bring big complex designs with fantastic new features, you know, implementing the application which he developed himself. And on top of it, it's a really smart game with smart idea.
It was born when I was playing the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I was sick, so I have not been in work, so I was just playing video games. And I really enjoyed to do the alchemy in Skyrim. And I was like, wow, I enjoy this so much. I can imagine the entire game just about this, about mixing ingredients and trying to find out what they do. And then I was, hey, there is no game like that. So that's probably a good idea to start one.
It had this, you know, Terry Pratchett-esque feeling of the universe. So we wanted to introduce also some funny graphics, some witty funny graphics, and who else than Davi. So he jumped on board. I was especially happy about the reception of the game. Oh yeah, and I can tell you, till this day, Davi Kosha is really unhappy regarding the cover, because you know, he made it in his way, in his crazy design, and we had him remove all the brains and all the Johnsons and all stuff like that which were there, and all the nipples, and he hates it because he said it's like Disney cover now. But I think it's, you know, people love it, so that's the most important.
A memory that I have with a CGE game would probably be with Alchemists. Alchemists is one of my favorite games of all time, and the very first time I learned how to play it, it was pretty early in my board gaming hobby adventures, I guess. And just seeing all of the boards all set up, and the fact that you have to use an app to use deduction, but there's also a worker placement component to the game, it really blew my mind. And it made me think like, wow, I didn't realize board games could do all of this, right? So that was probably one of my fondest memories.
The combination thing, it needs to make click. If you don't get how the deduction works, yeah, you will, what I'm doing here, I mix things and things happen, but I don't know what is the effect, yeah. But if it makes clicks, you can always see it in the face of the players. It's just like, oh, it's very cool. So Alchemist is a great project, and it is a milestone when we come back to the milestones. Alchemist definitely was a milestone. And guess what? Not many people know. It won in Germany the prize for the best rule in the year it was released. Now you may ask, in Germany they give out a prize for the best rule? Yes, they did. They stopped it a few years ago, but yes, it did. It was called the Golden Feather. And it had a real golden, not real gold, but it was a real heavy golden feather thing, yeah. People don't give us that much credit for it, but that was one of the first games where the app was working together with the board game. Now, in these days, it's pretty much common, so there are a lot of games where you can use your phone to do something, but when Alchemist was published, it wasn't common at all. It was very unique. So I really like the CG was one of the first to actually discover that part of board gaming, because I still think that can be beneficial to us as a players. Of course, some players prefer something different, and absolutely fine. You can play actually Alchemist without the phone if you want to, but it gives us some opportunities to do some different things in board game design. And this time, there were very few publishers bold enough to do that, yeah? So it's like, there was people like, for concerned, the game is like, I don't know, what if the app is not existing anymore? We are not trusting this new technology. Everybody was very, so we already saw this also with ours experimenting with that. So it was a risk to take, but I mean, CGE did something really smart. So they offered a solution without the app. It was very much less elegant, but in theory you could play without the app. And I think this was sort of like, okay, killing the argument. Well, I mean, you don't need the app, you can play like that. You will take 20 minutes more or half an hour, but that's the price you pay.
We were afraid that it would be too much for people, so there's an option to not have an app, but that means you have to have a fifth or another person that is not playing and is just doing a game master, and that's not fun when an app can do that. But nowadays it's a common thing to have, but because everyone has a phone in their pocket.
But releasing the app was really problematic, because at that time it was our first app actually we released, and we did not have any experience with that. And on Android it was easy, but on iOS back then it was big problem because of the approval process. And app was finally approved on Wednesday, and SN started on a Thursday, just one day after that. And we didn't know if they will approve it or not, because several times before Apple already rejected the app. But fortunately they approved it and it worked.
Yet, the most monumental shift was on the horizon, poised to reshape not only Czech Games Edition, but also the entire board game landscape in the year that followed. But more on that on the next episode.